This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and we have a shared vision for success in business and our personal lives. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their process. We intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. I want to add on, this isn't an informational podcast. We're not trying to give anybody advice. This is really record keeping for ourselves. And if you happen to gain advice from the podcast, you're welcome to take it. We like to start each podcast with a little bit of a business update and a life update for our future selves to gauge where we're at in our lives. My first note for the business update is that we've been going through a painful editing process, but that's not we, that's you. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's just, it's been challenging with the larger files have been getting in the way of the ease of the upload process. So just some delays in upload of raw footage, some delays in download of the edited footage, and some delays in upload of the finalized product to the channel. So hoping to get ahead of it this week by scheduling, instead of scheduling a Monday night to post Tuesday night, I'm going to schedule it Sunday night to post Tuesday night or Tuesday morning. So in case I have an issue Sunday, hopefully I can resolve by Monday. And so trying to pull the timeline back so that I can have a little bit more leeway coming up to the release date. So I'm hoping that this week that'll work. It's just been a little bit of a struggle.
What causes slow download and upload times?
Well, part of the problem was that I was trying to download the finalized footage and then upload the finalized product to the channels on the Cabo Bar Wi-Fi, where I move around a lot. Like sometimes I'll have like 2 hours at a bar, or I'll have 4 hours at a bar, and 4 hours at a bar is great. That's enough time. But if some delay happens or the Wi-Fi glitches, it'll cancel the upload or cancel the download or whatever. So that's been one issue. And then the upload of the raw footage I'm doing on my desktop at home where I have continuous Wi-Fi. So that hasn't really been too much of an issue. I did have it glitch out on me once or twice, but that hasn't been too much of a problem. And now I'm going to do the upload of the finalized product onto the channels from my desktop as well. I just had to log into all my accounts there, which I was trying to avoid doing because I knew it was going to be kind of a pain with the passwords and whatever. But now I learned my lesson. I'm just going to do it pretty much all from my desktop besides the editing portion, which will come from my laptop.
Yeah. I would rather go through the pain of changing the passwords around and whatnot and actually having the process.
Yeah, well, another thing that forced me too is the file size was too large to download onto my laptop. I have like 80 gigabytes of space on my laptop, and the file was like 95 or something like that.
How much space do you have on your desktop?
Like over 200. So I have plenty on the desktop, and I can delete them after I download them and upload them. So it's not a problem on the desktop. It was just I didn't and then Premiere was being weird with the file types and a bunch of bullshit. So I figured out the file type that works best. The file type that works best for the desktop was different than the one that works best for the laptop, but that's okay. I figured it out now.
Prevailing through problems.
That's right.
My first bullet was the editing process. My second is that we've been on a digital media blitz, preparing all of the printouts and the artwork and the social media posts that we're going to need for when we kickstart the business. We've gotten, I think, most of them done.
Yeah. You and I worked on that this week, and I slapped together, I think, over 10 different files this week. It was a lot of just content. And we can review that together and go through it. I'm super happy with how a majority of them turned out. There's a couple that I'm like, I don't really love that one, but I tweaked them yesterday. So we can go over those together today. But yeah, I'm super happy with the progress on the digital media items. And then you've been focusing on some other associated documents as well that you touch on.
I've been doing a lot of permitting and licensing research. When you're building a brick and mortar business, you have to do everything in junction with your city and your county and your state and your federal government. And it has never been easier to access all of these documents online. It's also never been...
Thanks to our new business.
It's also never been easier for the government to just fucking throw shit wherever, say that it's online available to you, and make it impossible to find. So I've been going through a lot of back and forth with other business owners, with the own demons in my mind, and Google to try and figure out what fucking government website has the files that we need to tell us what exactly we need to do.
Yeah.
And the problem with a lot of these permittings are ultimately, like, if you're in the room with the person who's going to be licensing your permit, that's not the time to ask questions. You have to have it figured out by then.
Right.
You have to say, like, hey, I have this prepared for you. Did I have to do this, or is this overkill? And they'll probably tell you it's overkill, and by that point, you wasted your time. So working through that, it's not easy, but it's getting done. And then I wrapped up the grant research. Grants, I spoke on this in a previous podcast. Grants are largely to help specific industry that the government wants to grow, or people that the government feels need a leg up.
Mm-hmm.
So minorities or people with disabilities, grants, and a lot of research and development in agriculture, genetics, and things like that, grants. Spoiler, our business isn't in either of those areas. Neither of us are minorities, and neither of us are medically disabled, probably clinically, but
I'll be gay for money.
Jesus Christ. Not a whole lot of money for what we've talked about too. But the grants, the reason I closed out my business update on the grants is because my first bullet point in my life update is related to this. So the president of the board of directors for my high school rowing team reached out to me a couple months ago, and he was like, hey, would you consider coaching? And I was like, absolutely not. I have no time. I want to give back to the team through charitable donation after I've made it in business. And he was like, okay, sounds good. And he came back to me last week and he said, hey, what about a position on the board of directors? It's only like a 3-hour meeting once a month. So for me, that means a 3-hour meeting and then probably like 9 hours of preparation. So like 12 hours a month, not terrible. And he was like, come out and to meet me. And I did on Saturday, and they were doing a parent meeting, and it was the coaches with like a microphone with a small speaker talking to the parents at the side of the boathouse.
Mm-hmm.
Super balls hot. The parents are getting upset, and they just spoke from an itinerary for like, it must have been 45 minutes in the heat. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, all this could have been an email. Why are they just sharing their documents where they have all of this written out? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so when I went up and met him and some of the board members afterwards, I was like, hey man, like, he officially offered me the position of a alumni advisor, which is a position that I've been advocating for 2 years, because every 4 years, the board of directors, which consists of the parents of the rowers, cycles over, because your kid joins 9th grade and then 4 years later he graduates. So you're in the board for that amount of time. So you're in knowing that you're going to be out in 3 years and then you're gone, and you don't care about knowledge transfer to the next generation. You didn't really do much while you were there. It's kind of in shambles. There's no structure at all. So they were having problems. The board wanted to fire the coach because the coach wouldn't put their kids in the better boat. And I had to break the news to them. It's because your kid is slow. No parent likes.
Yeah, I remember that situation.
Yeah. And that's what I brought up this position. I was like, you need somebody who knows rowing to be there consistently year after year to welcome in the new parents and show them the ropes. Maybe not to actually do everything, but just guide them, be an advisor. And so Chris, the president, offered me this position. He was like, this is what we're thinking. And I was like, did you know that I brought this up 2 years ago? And he's like, dude, people have been talking about it, but I didn't know that you came up with it. So it's the position that I made. And then I requested to not just be appointed to the position, but to be voted in. So at the next parent meeting, I'm going to go and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to show them an undeniable stack of proof that I am who I say I am and I'm worth being an alumni. So I think I'm going to bring in a scale and then all the medals that I earned from high school, and I'm going to weigh the medals in front of everybody. I'm going to tell them I have whatever 4.5 pounds of experience, and then I'm going to let them vote.
That's fun me. I like it. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah. Well, my whole mantra is, we talked about this in our previous podcast with our guest, a great man doesn't seek to lead, he's called to it. And so although this guy is asking me to come do it, it's the position that I came up with several years ago, and I'm not going to be appointed to a position if I'm not wanted. I'm going to put myself out there, tell them exactly who I am, and if they don't want me, fine. But Space Coast Crew utilizes grants. They have a grant writer. That's a position on the board of directors that they use to appeal to local government to get government funding for their program. So in being the advisor to them, I'm also going to be learning about grant writing.
Cool. Very cool. So you're really diving into it. I have not looked at the materials that you put together regarding grants. Actually, that's not true. I did read over the documents that you sent me in the email, but we haven't sat down together and really gone through it. So I have a very broad understanding of the wealth of research that you've done. But as the time comes and we push forward, I'm sure there will be a time where we go through all that stuff together. So yeah, I look forward to that.
Generally speaking, I haven't really dove into it either. But
yeah,
I've
I
better
read the
understand.
document that you put together. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good outline.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some tidbits and stuff like that that you could provide insight on for me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah.
Same with the permitting. But a few more updates before we get into the bulk of everything. The first thing is I've decided to change my sleep schedule. I've always been the stay up until 3 and then pay the penalties tomorrow guy.
Yeah.
And that really promotes an awesome workflow from like 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. But the rest of the day just fucking sucks. So I'm trying to change it. I'm going to follow Hormozy's principle of setting an alarm for your bedtime to try and get to sleep every day at the right time, because then you're just going to wake
I did that for a while, and then it works well, and then I get back into that groove of, fuck, I just want to stay up and work, because it's like, I can't fall asleep at midnight if I have all this stuff that I really want to do and like really excited about. Like, it's really hard for me to fall asleep. So it's like I just continue cranking work, and then it's like fucking 3 or 4 in the morning. You're like, oh fuck.
I want to get to that schedule when there's not a penalty for not waking up at 8 a.m. But right now, there's a penalty at work for me. My name is being passed around. And with the spacing that we are at in the contracts at work, I can't.
Some guy came up to me and he was like, how's it working second shift? And I was like, you fucking cunt. You know I'm on first shift. I just don't fucking care.
Yeah. But like,
and I was actually sick this past week. So
I am so sick right now.
Yeah, we were both sick, and it's fucking sucked waking up in the morning while I was sick. So I had a decent reason, but I was like, you fucking bastard, you're really gonna say that in front of the 10 people in the office? Go fucking back to your desk.
Yeah. No, people tell me I come in at like 11 and I'm fucking sick as shit, and someone will be like, how's it feel to know that you're gonna be here until 8 p.m. tonight? And I'm like, feels great, man. Go back to your desk. Get the fuck away. Come here. Why don't I tell you?
Feels great.
But like that shit grinds my gears. But I know that when we're running our business, at number one, there's not a penalty to waking up at 10 a.m. And number two, the only penalty for waking up at 10 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. is that we're missing out on money. And I will sleep less if it means making more money. But right now, I get paid the same if I come in at 8 or 11 anyway.
Yeah, that's my problem too. That's my problem too. Because when I'm motivated to get up, I get up.
Yeah. So in the meantime, I'm going to start setting my sleep schedule, alarm for bedtime, and I'm going to try and stay consistent with that. Even afterwards, even after we're out of the 9 to 5 and we're doing our own business and stuff, I'm still going to make it a goal to get 8 hours of sleep a night. But the 8 hours is going to be a moving margin. What I'd like to do is just set a timer when I go to sleep, like 8 hours, and then go to sleep. And then for whatever time I go to bed, I wake up 8 hours later.
That's a good thought.
But I can't do that with work. And then I've got a couple cool anecdotes before jumping into our stuff. But do you have life updates before I do those anecdotes?
I just wanted to note that work has been getting busier. I actually worked some like authentic 10-hour shifts this past week. I'm sure you noticed I was getting to the bar at like 8 or 8:30, and I was getting back from work. And I was coming in at relatively reasonable time, somewhere between 9:30 and 10:30. So, some pretty long shifts for me this week. It's been getting busy, but it's actually been a little bit nice because I like have stuff to do. It also looks good, even if I come in at fucking 10, if I'm cranking out 4 documents and getting all this stuff approved and going through this process and communicating with my lead, it seeks to my benefit. So that stuff has been going well. And then quick life note too, I did 2 oil changes and an AC compressor this weekend, and I have another oil change to do after this podcast, so I'm making a little bit of extra cash money that will help support me throughout our business build when that time comes. So those are the only 2 things I have to add on.
Cool. Yeah, work's been picking up. It sucks because a lot of my work is in a different building, so it's like I come in at 10 and then I leave until 3 and then come back and they're like, where have you been all day? I'm like, I've been in the other building actually getting shit done. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, no, fucking seriously. So the first little anecdote I have, it's an interesting note on the success of billionaires. So a 2023 Hurun Global Rich List study showed that 70% of billionaires are self-made, while 30% are legacy, meaning they inherited it from their ancestors. According to a 2023 UBS study, billionaires who inherited their wealth are less likely to give it away. The study found that 68% of first-generation billionaires said philanthropy was important to them, compared to 32% of the inheriting generation, which is interesting because similar
Can you read that last statistic again? I was focused on the previous one.
68% of first-generation billionaires, meaning you've earned your money, say philanthropy is important to them.
Got it.
And 32% of the inheriting generation said. So over double the amount of people who is new money say philanthropy is important to them. So I feel that there's a misconception. Our entire podcast today is going to be on misconceptions in business in general. Yep. Yeah. But to break into that, there's a huge misconception that rich people don't care about others and that they only do charity as a, publicity stunt. But in actuality, new money people don't feel that way. New money people genuinely give their money and genuinely care, probably because they came from nothing first. Exactly. They understand and they want to give back. But yeah, 32% of the inheriting generation say that it's not important, or say that it's important to them. So it's 68%.
Yeah, so if you kind of grew up in it, are like, whatever.
Because they grew up in it. They're like you, the poor.
I wonder what the statistics are on people who are middle class to upper middle class. What percentage of them think that philanthropy is important?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think this is a point that I kind of want to raise later in the podcast. But what I've seen is that the people who tend to complain about the wealthy not giving enough tend to be upper middle class folk, right? Or people who are just not strong-minded themselves, right? And so I'd be really curious to see out of the group, or at least one group of people who consistently complain about that issue or whatever it is, what percentage of them give any amount, like $5 a year to charity, like anything, right? Because, anyone who's middle class to upper middle class can at least afford like $20 a year to some charity, right? But what percentage of them do that? And then what percentage of them do have these opinions that wealthy people just don't give back and blah, 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 right?
Right.
So that's a really interesting idea for me, and we'll get into all of this, but I find it fast. At least intuitively, I would assume that there's a higher percentage of wealthy people that give some amount, any amount, to philanthropic, organizations or to charities than a percentage of upper middle class people or middle class people.
Yep.
And the argument of what I've heard from the middle class and the upper middle class, where it's like, well, they have so much money, they don't even need that much money. And then, anyone who's below their economic status, is in below an upper middle class or middle class economic status, can be like, well, you have too much money and you have more than you need. Like, I'm living here with 3 people sharing an apartment because I can't afford it. Like, what it's to say that you can afford 2 cars and a house.
Right.
So that argument can always backtrack to the next person down the economic ladder.
Yeah.
Which is, it's an interesting problem. And I have a nice example that I want to raise into the podcast.
Okay.
But I'd love you to progress.
Yeah, I'll hold off on my comments on that then for later on. Stay tuned. My last anecdote is I read an article. It's titled "Why You Can't Get a Restaurant Reservation." There's a group of college kids that are calling high-end restaurants and making reservations like 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out. Fancy places, like $10,000 dinners. Fancy. Yeah. They'll call, they'll make a reservation because it's free to make a reservation or it's very little money. And then what they'll do is they'll advertise that they're selling reservations to this place. So you're trying to take your dad to dinner for his anniversary with your mom, and it's next week, and I want to take him to, I don't know any fancy places.
I feel like I heard about this on like Modern Wisdom podcast.
They're making $80K a year doing this.
It's like a staggering amount. Yeah.
All they're doing is calling, booking.
People do the same thing at the DMV too. Remember when we were talking with our wealthier friend who owns the Mercedes?
Yeah.
And he was saying how
you can say his name. He's a celebrity now.
That's true, Greg. Greg. But watch his podcast with Matthew Cox. Actually, it's really interesting and it's awesome. But anyways, he was talking about how he was so frustrated that he had to go to the DMV and register his car, and it's a waste of time. And he hates standing in line, and blah 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 blah. And I was like, well, there are people who will go for you. I don't know how it works, but I know there are people who will make reservations on your behalf and stand in line for you and do all the paperwork and stuff for you. They charge like $50 or $100 or whatever.
Right.
And so it's crazy that there are so many opportunities. I feel like we learn about a new business opportunity and a new thing that you can do that seems pretty easy, that generates a good amount of income like every fucking week.
Yep.
And there are people out there who are like, I don't know what to do to make extra money. I'm like, fucking pick anything. Like you see, it's right in front of you. Just try something.
Dude, there's this crushing feeling that I have every time I hear about a new way someone's doing something that seems easy to make money, a crushing feeling, because I recognize I continually find these things that people are doing that are easy and straightforward that make money, and I'm not doing any of them. And it's because we're not succumbing to the woman in the red dress and getting distracted. We're sticking to the business that we've chose. But man, the temptation and the feeling of like, am I doing the right thing by not following all of these different paths is like crippling. It's crippling.
Yeah. It sucks. It sucks.
I know it's the right thing to do, but
yeah. I have like some thoughts about like, you know, trying drop shipping again and spending like 2 or 3 hours a week on it. But I'm like on a very in between stage, because like I see it as like, if I could try one more time and it clicked and I could even get like $1,000 or $2,000 a month, that would really help flow, you know, my financial status through the bill of our next business. But I have like strong reservations at the same time too, because I don't want it to be like a woman in the red dress situation where I'm like juggling too much or I'm trying to pursue too many different avenues. I mean, we know people who seemingly try to go down too many different paths of business and just get caught up being spread too thin.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a consideration, but I'm still considering it, but really weighing it carefully, because I don't want it to be a situation where, you know, I just am too spread thin between tasks.
My grandpa had this saying when I was growing up, which was, you can't half-ass 2 things. You need to whole-ass 1 thing.
Right.
If you're going to do something, jump in with both feet.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we flipped the BMW, and I'm like, fuck, dude, we can start advertising this auction thing and then do that, and then maybe make a little money on the side. Or I'm like, oh, we can advertise Sorok's Automotive, and then we can make a little money that way. Like, I keep thinking of different ways that we could like make a little bit of money to help us out now. But I also think to myself, like you preach fully committing to what you're doing. So fully commit to what you're doing. You know, it's tough to save money, but at the same time, though, like, it's kind of like if you're unhappy with the shape that you're in, guess whose fault that is? If you're unhappy with how much money you have, guess whose fault that is? I know what my income is, and I know how much is in my savings. And if I'm unhappy with that, I know that there are things I can cut out. Like, it fucking even comes down to the gas bill. I live within biking distance of work. I could sleep less and then bike to work if I wanted to. Like,
True.
There are still things that I could cut out if I were really, truly unhappy with how much money I'm saving, because I really do make enough. I think that I make enough to live. You know, probably not enough to live comfortably or save, but, you know, other people have had it worse and done better. So that's my take on it.
That is true. That's true. I think one of the faults that I have is like, I hear so many different sides of the argument, and I try to put, I guess, fundamentally speaking, like one of my character traits is to try and put myself in other people's shoes or other people's perspectives, or try to see things from many different angles. And so I get stuck seeing all of these different opportunities from all these different angles, and then I get stuck in this like channel of analysis where I am going down the channel I'm continuing to walk, but there are all these different hallways on the side, and it's just like so tempting to try one of the hallways and move back in, you know. So yeah, at least that's how I like visualize in my picture mind.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's the period that we're at right now really sucks, because we work our fucking balls off all the time.
Right.
And
there is no monetary.
There's no monetary output. There is so much input and so little output. And I think that sometimes I think to myself, because I'll see a Hormozy thing and he's like, dude, if you're working 40, 80, 100-hour weeks and you're not making any more money, you're working on the wrong thing. And so I consider, am I working on the wrong thing? Should we be switching tracks? And then I take pause and I'm like, dude, let's do a reality check real quick. Okay.
Yeah.
We're 23 years old. We've been out of college and in this world for about a year.
Yeah, about a year and change, year and a couple months.
Right. We're at the period right now where if we're putting in effort, it means that we're learning. They don't send Navy SEALs into a fucking mission campaign after they make it through Hell Week. Like, you go through so much more classroom training and training at home before they send you overseas. They do so much prep work. So I could enlist in the military and go to Afghanistan, Pakistan tomorrow, right? I could quit my job and start drop shipping tomorrow and learn the tough way. But I think what we're doing right now is a little bit different. We're doing specialized training. We're doing a lot of it. Right. We're going through Hell Week. We're going through BUDS. We're going through all the pool training stuff. We're becoming fucking mercenaries. And the problem is we haven't seen battle yet. So all the enlisted dudes who are in Afghanistan and Pakistan and growing out their deployment beards are radioing back to us and calling us green because we're not out there. But they don't know what we're becoming.
Well, I also think it important to kind of piggyback off of that analogy is the people who, a lot of the people who seem to be calling us back, we're doing our specialized training, are people who are like in a low-level Marines or Army position, right? And we're trying to hit like the top dollar, specialized Navy SEAL,
right?
But, all these guys who are currently out there fighting are in a different level that's easier to get into, and they'll be like, well, you're green, you're doing this, you're doing that, blah, 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 it's taking you so long. Why is it taking you so long, right? And another thing, too, to kind of jump more into that topic is when I was in college, I felt so shitty that I didn't have like a project car or something else to work on. And it was really fun because at the time I
have a project car. You don't want a project car.
Your project car is your daily.
Project car means unreliable. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. But my best friend at the time had like 2 or 3 cars that he'd continually circle through and like work on. And
what second car is your Miata? It is. I'll shut up.
No, you're good. And so he had these project cars and stuff to work on the weekend, and it looked so fun. And I had the Miata, and I was in college, so I had like no time for project car or space or fucking money. I was super broke, and like it really irked me that like, why don't I just jump out of college and get a job that pays like fucking $25 an hour, and then I could try some entrepreneurship stuff. Maybe I can get go even higher than that in terms of income and whatever, right? And I stuck it through college, and I finished my classes, and I got my degree, and I'm happy I made that choice. But the temptation to look at someone who was making good money, decent money, 25 an hour, to me while I was in college was like, oh man, that's great money. And looking at his project cars, I'm like, man, I wish I could do that. But now I'm in an engineering position, and I'm building my own business, and I make more money than he does now. So it's just, you have to be able to play the long game when it comes to certain businesses. And Alex Hormozi has a great podcast about this, but he draws out, I'll draw it for the audience. He draws out 2 diagrams, and he says there's 2 different kinds of businesses. And one of the businesses is something that's easy to start, but hard to grow past a certain point. And it escalates quickly, and then it plateaus, and it's really hard to get past that point.
Dropship.
Right? Dropshipping, for example. You can get to like $1 million a year, but then after that point, it's really hard to break through.
Right.
If you're trying to get something that is long-term and really grows wealth, it's going to be flat for a long time, and then it's going to skyrocket, and then the sky's the limit for that one, right?
Amazon.
So it just really depends on what avenue you want to take. And so I thought that was a good analogy, and I liked his graphs when he does his...
I like your graphs.
I try. Does his little podcast. Did we all do like the Mickey Mouse pen?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Over the
guy with the purple crayon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We should have a whiteboard for one of the future. There's a whiteboard right there, but anyways.
True. Yeah. I have a whiteboard at home. We could set it up somehow. I think I have that big one in the garage, the big like 6-foot one.
Did I give you mine? Is that mine, or is that
yours? The one I bought.
We have 2 6-foot whiteboards. Did you know Amazon didn't make a single dollar in profit for 9 years?
Wow.
Jeff Bezos started. Yeah. Because he didn't start with the instantaneous internet platform that he had.
Books,
he started by books. He started by renting out books. And the internet was brand new, so it was like really shitty, but he didn't make money for 9 years.
Did you hear about the wine company that started in the early 2000s that their only gimmick was there was free shipping on the wine?
No.
This was like early 2000s. There was a wine distribution company. They essentially like had a bunch of different types of wines and whatever, and they'd ship them to you. And at that time, the free shipping was like unheard of at that point. And so he launches this site. It's free shipping for all these different wines, whatever. And he was getting thousands of fucking orders. He was getting orders from people who are like, my kid is 12 years old, but when he graduates high school, I want to have this wine available for him. Like fucking orders for people who are like 8 years out from when they're going to need this wine.
Wow.
He was getting orders from people who are like, my daughter's going to get married one day. She's 16 right now, but this is such a good deal, I can't pass it up. Like fucking crazy shit because he had free shipping. Like today, that's like, what the fuck? Like everything has free shipping or close to it, right? But like back in the day, it was like, this was crazy revolutionary.
Right.
I just thought it was an interesting anecdote. I don't remember where I got that from, but
we are back in the day right now. Right now, there's something that nobody's doing that when it happens, everyone's going to go, oh my fucking God, dude, I can't believe they lived without it. I can't believe they never did this, right? I'm like, yeah, all we got to do is all we have to do is find that thing.
Yes.
Find that thing, make it available to everyone.
I think our next business actually may be that thing, because I have a very strong belief that business will grow immensely in the future as it develops. I think it could. I think
the system thing.
No, the closer one. Either or, because they're both tied into kind of like the same genre.
I don't think
right. The business we're building now.
Yes.
Right. The brick and mortar.
Yep.
Business. That business, I believe, will prosper and grow across the U.S.
Got it. I see.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that being in that industry, regardless of what path we take in that industry, will be a good bet for the future. I think right now, if we went up to, I don't know, fucking Idaho, and we're like, yeah, we want to do this thing, blah, 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 like it would flunk, or it could, right? It may not, whatever, right? But I think there will be a time, I bet we fucking could. But I bet there will be a time 5 or 10 years from now where we would go to Idaho and it would be welcome there and also in need of that, right? So I think that we are in a good business. I have high hopes for this industry as a whole.
I'm skeptical because this industry, I'm not skeptical, but I'm cautious because this industry, the barrier to entry is so low and right now supply is high, but eventually demand will meet supply. Right now, demand is high. Supply is low. Eventually, supply will meet demand, and then the barrier to entry is going to change, and the profit margins are going to change. And so, I think that.
Well, I think it also the good thing. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
The good thing about the barrier to entry being low is that you're going to get a lot of shitty people that don't know what they're doing entering it, and that allows for a great opportunity for people who do know what they're doing and do have a vision to just do fucking better.
Right.
Do better. I heard that on Alex Ramosi podcast yesterday. Do more and do better. That's the answer to every fucking problem you have.
Yep. I think that it is up to us, responsibly, to raise the barrier to entry. Make it harder. Because
make something so fucking good that people don't understand how to replicate it.
Exactly. And even if they have the money to replicate it, they don't know why. Right now, a lot of people do it because it's easy to do, and they don't understand why it makes money. We understand why it makes money. We're going to do it better.
Yeah, we've seen quite a few people do that either in this industry or similar industries, and it does not work out well for them.
Right. All right, let's get into the podcast. Today, I want to talk about common misconceptions in business, in our personal lives, and why we're actually different from these misconceptions. I want to address the misconceptions and then address why we're not falling victim to the same things. Because sometimes I feel like we talk about our plans and our aspirations, and we can be perceived as falling into these things. And I just want to make it very clear that that's not what we're trying to do. So I want to start off with speaking about something that Robert Kiyosaki made very clear to us early on in our learnings in the fundamentals of financial literacy, which is being fake rich. Because not all rich people are truly rich. There are a lot of fake rich people. There's somebody who I work with who owns nice cars. He's got a nice house. He wears fancy clothes. He's got nice watches. But I know what level he is at work, so I know what his income is. And I know that his expenses must barely clear what his income is. He can't be saving more than XYZ amount a month, right? And it's really interesting to me that people choose to spend the majority of their income on nice things, even if they have a savings account or a retirement account, because I mean, I guess I can understand from a 9-to-5 perspective, you're not going anywhere. You know exactly where you're going. You know what your goal salary is. So why not enjoy the money that you have right now? But generally speaking, I find that not many people recognize the difference between assets and liabilities. So I want to give a quick definition for these terms before we get into our discussion. By Robert Kiyosaki's definition, an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and liabilities are something that take money out of your pocket. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. And I define being fake rich as a term used to describe somebody who spends the majority of their income on liabilities. Liabilities would be cars, watches, homes, clothes, nice things, etc. A lot of people, number one misconception I want to bring up in this podcast, a lot of people think that buying a home is buying an asset. Assets are not something that hold value. Assets are something that put money in your pocket every day, that cash flow. I was speaking to Justin about investments because he was talking about how crypto is an asset. I said, it's not an asset. It's not a liability per se because it does retain its value. I would call it an investment, not an asset, not a liability. But my first question is, why do you feel why do people feel the need to be fake rich? And do they know that they're doing it?
So I think that people really love the attention that it gives them, right? Like if you show up in a fancy car with a fancy watch or nice clothes and stuff like that, like people try to emulate what they see on the internet as rich people without putting in the work to actually become rich. And so they emulate the like looks and appearance and like the physical, like, you know, picture of what they're, the painting that they're trying to make looks similar to the guy who's actually wealthy, but they aren't willing to put in the self-growth. They aren't willing to figure out how to make their money work for them instead of, you know, what they're currently on, which is working for their money, right? And that takes a lot of effort and self-growth and time, and I just don't think that they're willing to go through that process, but they want to look like what they think a rich person looks like.
I have a theory that they think that they are rich people. Like the guy who I know, let's say hypothetically, he makes $180K a year. He has enough money to buy a sports car or 2 or 3 or a house or fancy clothes or a fancy watch. We know someone else who spends money. He likes watches. He spends a lot of money on watches. And those things are nice things, but they're liabilities. They're not assets. They don't put money in your pocket. But I'm wondering if those people think that they are rich people. Like the only difference between them and Elon Musk, the scented billionaire, is that they have a higher paying job. I wonder if they genuinely think, oh, the only difference between me and someone else is like the number of money that comes in per month. But if my number goes up to $1 million or $2 million, I'm not really going to spend that money on different things because I can afford the rich people things now. So I don't need more income because I can get the nice things now. Like if you own an entry-level Ferrari or an Aston Martin and a Rolex, like there's almost like a sense of satisfaction that you don't really need a Koenigsegg now because you have a Ferrari. It's a, you know, two something. What are the base level Ferraris? Like they're mid 2000s, like California T.
You could get something for $80K.
Yeah, if you get an $80,000 Ferrari and a $10,000 Rolex, like you're balling. You don't need more. So I feel like they see a little bit of success and then they get satiated, and so they go, well, why would I bother having assets or whatever? Because I'm comfortable, I'm satiated.
Do you think that people who don't pursue this like millionaire self-growth mindset that just want to like work 80-hour weeks and work for a paycheck and then spend their money on lavish things, do you think those kinds
40-hour weeks?
40-hour weeks. Yeah.
We work 80-hour weeks.
Yeah.
We work 40-hour weeks.
40.
It's
sometimes people work overtime.
No. Right. The reason I correct you there is because
80 hours is a lot.
we have a skewed sense of reality, and when we're speaking about what regular people do, I want to make sure that we're being grounded because 80 hours is a standard work week for us. That's an incredible
low work week for us, honestly.
I know. And I really want to emphasize your misspeak here because it really shows the level that we're at. Eventually, an 80-hour work week is going to be fucking chump change for us.
Right.
We're going to have everything so optimized. We're going to have people cooking our food, etc. But regular people work 40-hour work weeks.
Yeah, that's true. It's yeah, you're right. I think that the people who work 40-hour work weeks, do you think that those people who are just working their time and working for their money and kind of spending it lavishly, they don't realize what growth happens when you pursue making your money work for you instead of working for your money? Like is that clear? What I'm trying to say is there's a discrepancy and a difference between you working for your money and your money working for you, right? Mm-hmm. And for people who don't understand that there's a discrepancy there, they think they're one and the same.
Let's talk about the discrepancy.
So do you think that people who are, you know, working for their money think they're in the same self-growth boat or they're on the same track as the people who are making their money work for them just because they have the same physical things? You think they think they're in the same box. They've convinced themselves of that.
Right. Because if you've got one guy who is a day trader and he's like, yeah, this morning I input 20 grand and then I watched the numbers and then I cashed out and I have 40 grand at the end of the day.
Sure.
They think to themselves, oh, well, I go to work and next Thursday I'm going to get a check for 10 grand. So it's like the same thing because we both make X amount of money. I really think that they don't understand the difference between making your money work for you and working for your money. I think that all they see is income. They don't see method of income.
Right.
But even then,
that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that before, but it's really interesting to think that those people who are trying to look fake rich don't even realize that they're looking fake rich, or don't even realize that they are fake rich.
No, they think they're rich.
Right. They don't realize the discrepancy between what true wealth is and what they have.
Exactly.
And I think that the point we're raising is that discrepancy and that difference comes down to working for your money versus making your money work for you.
Right.
Right. Or at least in a financial fundamental sense. I think there are many differences between those two people in terms of how they grow personally and what paths they're looking at and what values they bring to life. We're going to talk a little bit later about social circles and other stuff too. But I think that financially, that is the core misunderstanding from people who are rich, real rich, and fake rich.
And I think the reason for that, I think the reason they don't see the difference between making their money work for them and them working for their money is because they have different goals to what we do. Our end state goal is to not need to work. Our end state goal is to have everything just fucking be done for us, right? Mm-hmm. We're the type of people who will never cash in on that and never retire, but I would like to have the option to not work anymore, right? That's what's most important to me, is not having to go into an office every day. That's freedom.
Yeah.
I think these people, their goal is just to have the nice things. I think to them, what rich is having a sports car and having a nice watch. And for what you and I, rich is the freedom to do what you please.
Yeah.
Because right now, we don't have that freedom. If I don't go to work tomorrow, it's Sunday. If I don't go to work tomorrow, I can't pay for groceries.
Right.
I think that's the fundamental difference.
I hear that. I like the point you raised too. I agree. I would agree.
Yeah. So I've got another quote. It's an Alex Hormozy quote. But I feel like I'll just read the quote. You can impress poor people by outspending them. To impress rich people, you need to outwork them. And I feel like a lot of the fake rich people that we know spend their money to impress people beneath them. Because the rich people that we know recognize there are bigger fish out there with nicer things, but they just don't think about it. Because every day they hang out with fucking scum like us who don't have that money, and they can flex. Then they can look cool, and they're the cool guy. They're liked. They want to be liked. It's not coming from a malicious standpoint or I have more than you and I'm better than you standpoint, but it's just this person thinks I'm cool and have cool things. I'm liked. I like to be liked. I think that's what drives them. But those fake rich people do not recognize what hard work looks like. And so when they see someone working hard, it doesn't resonate with them in the same way it resonates with us.
Well, I think another good point, or a point to raise, maybe discuss, would be that there's a lot of content on the internet that's like, you got to work smart instead of working hard, or you got to, figure out how to make this cash flow asset instead of, working hard and then trying to build something, right? Like what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of content on the internet that makes it seem like hard work isn't the answer to financial freedom. Mm-hmm. And so it's like a similar analogy to when someone who's overweight goes to the gym and sees a gym trainer and they're like super jacked, like ripped on steroids, and they go up to the gym trainer and they're like, well, I don't want to look like you. It's like the person who's overweight doesn't realize that level of fitness doesn't come overnight, right? That trainer can help them get to the level of fitness that they want to, because there's a large gap between the steroid guy super jacked and the overweight person, and you can stop anywhere on that line. Right. And so I think that people look at a lot of this content on the internet and they're like, oh, well, like, I'm trying to work smart instead of work hard, but I feel like I'm working hard right now, so am I doing the wrong thing? And they come up with excuses in their own head to avoid the work and avoid the fact that it just takes hard work to get to the point where you can have your money work for you, or you can have cash flow assets that you don't have to worry about day to day, right? Mm-hmm. It takes hard work to get there.
Right. I think it's because, again, the end goal is just to be rich. And no matter what, I don't care who you are, everybody is going to look for the path of least resistance. You want to find the way that makes you the most amount of money the easiest. I mean, fuck, we're doing it right now. I don't want to have to go to an office for 40 hours a week. I want to make more money doing something where I do not have to go. Arguably, in the grand scheme, that's the path of least resistance. The problem is I have to do that path and the 9-to-5 path at the same time, and that ends up being 130 hours a week. But generally speaking, I think that the end state of just wanting to be rich leads people to try and find a shortcut. You've heard the get rich quick schemes. There are so many businesses and courses and sales models out there that are not marketed as get rich quick, but sell on the premise of get rich quick. People think, oh, it's not get rich quick. I'm learning a skill and then I'm teaching that skill to other people. And so that is going to make me money and that's working for it. But essentially what you're doing is you're paying for a $3,000 course because you're being promised that in less than 12 months, you can make more than $200,000. I've almost bought into these courses before. When we were doing drop shipping and looking at things, here's the wrap on those courses. Someone has developed a sales course that teaches you how to be a salesperson. And then they sell that course to you. You pay $3,000 to learn how to become a salesperson. Then they teach you how to develop your own course to go sell to people.
Yeah.
They don't care what you do after that. So now you're like, well, fuck, the only way I can make this $3,000 I just paid worth it is if I make my own course to teach other people how to sell, because now I know how to sell.
And then you got a huge volume of people who don't know, their head from their ass, and they're creating these fucking courses.
Dude,
they're terrible.
They're creating courses that don't teach anything because they didn't really learn anything. Because they're not learning sales in the traditional sense of sitting down and giving it to you straight and saying you're learning sales. This person is teaching you the way to make more money out of a 9-to-5 than you ever could in a 9-to-5. They're all vague because they're not teaching you anything specific. They're just teaching you sales in general, but they don't shoot straight with you. They don't say, I'm going to teach you how to sell a product. You have to go find a product because finding a product is hard. It's easier to teach someone how to sell than what to sell. So they create these courses. I digress. To close out this topic, I've got one more question, which is, how do you think being fake rich impacts someone's success in their business?
Like if someone who's a business owner is trying to be fake rich?
Yeah, so let's say you and I are working with somebody and we're all working towards the same goal on the same project. Obviously, you and I are different than this person, but let's say this person, their goal is just to be wealthy. They don't really care about, how they get there. They just want to have that money. How do you think that's going to impact them in the long term?
I think that they will chase short-term financial goals rather than long-term painful growth. And I think that long-term painful growth at the end of the day is a more prosperous way to get to, the real wealth that people desire, or a lot of people desire. Right. I think that if you're chasing short-term goals and you're kind of, trying to be fake rich, but, kind of make it as well, you're not going to end up having the foresight to be able to really build something meaningful.
I agree. I had a thought. It just barely slipped out of my head. Restate your topic. What were you saying again?
I was saying that people who are focused on short-term growth often do not have the foresight to seek something long-term that's a more painful process, but will ultimately prosper.
There's beauty in that. There's beauty. So I define success as, have you met the goals you set for yourself? Because if a homeless person's goals are to beg for enough money to buy McDonald's every day, and he does that, he's a successful person. My goals happen to be different because I have set different goals for myself. So I might never be successful. My definition of successful might be, I'm a billionaire who's living on the planet Venus. If I'm never a billionaire and I never live on the planet Venus, or I never do either or one or the other, I'll never be successful by my own terms. But I think that success is exactly what you want it to be, and it's up to you to set those goals. And I think what's beautiful about people being fake rich is that most times they're happy. When they're communicating and speaking to people who have less than them, they're happy. And it's easy to find people who have less than them, because did you know that the average American can't pull $1,000
like out of their bank account?
And the average person cannot come into a room with you and put $1,000 on the table. They don't have it.
Wow.
At any given moment, they do not have $1,000 in their savings account.
Wow, that's wild.
That is wild. So we are so fortunate and so. I mean, we're deserving of it, but I'm grateful. I'll say I'm grateful of the position that we're at to be able to put that $1,000 down. But there are so many people who can't. And so if you have $10,000 in your bank account, right, and you can put a $5,000 payment down to drive a McLaren around for a day, you can go drive around people who don't have $1,000 to their name and feel good about yourself and feel like the man. And in their sense, they're successful because they're liked. And I think that ultimately what fake rich comes down to, its antithesis, is selling yourself short in your goals and yet still being successful. That's what fake rich is.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I mean, ultimately, I think that people who are going for a fake rich lifestyle, like you said, have different goals and different definitions of success, and it's just not the definition that we have.
Right. Now, I'll ask you this: do you want fancy cars?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want fancy watches?
Maybe.
Do you want fancy clothes?
Yeah, I like clothes.
Right. Are you willing to acquire those things at the cost of greatness in business?
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And those people are.
Right. I wonder if those people who are fake rich, if they have like a small business and they can barely afford a Ferrari and whatever, actually, like you said, they might have a different definition of success, and their success, that small business that makes them, $8K a month or $6K a month or whatever, might be their great feat in business. Like they just have a different lens that they're looking through.
You and I met a kid the other night at the bar who works at a Nissan car company. And he came in and he started asking about our cars, and he got excited.
Mason hates when this happens, so I make a conscious effort to weave these people into the conversation and talk with Mason.
I'm not trying to
he came up to Mason and he asked him about his car, and I was like, "It's a baseline V6."
I was just not in the mood to chat. I just wanted to work.
It's true. Mason's a very nice guy most of the time. We were just focused.
To pull value from this interaction, which was not an interaction I was really looking forward to or enjoyed, but still, I'm going to try and glean value from it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
He came in and he was talking about how I own a V8 Camaro, and Sandra joked that it was a V6, and he said, "Oh, I used to have an EcoBoost Mustang, but now I'm in the market for something cooler. I'm in the market for a C7 Corvette." And you were like, "Oh, where do you work?" Because I could immediately tell, a young kid who's shopping for a 5-figure car, you were like, "Where do you work?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm a car salesman at the Nissan dealership." And that told me immediately that this kid is looking to sell, or he's looking to buy an item that is the bulk of his income.
Yeah.
It's probably, and this is an assumption, all this is an assumption, it's probably somebody who's not had this kind of money before, and his goal right now is a C7 Corvette. And he's just now making enough money to actually make that happen, so he's going to go get it. He's going to fucking love that car. He's going to love showing his friends. He's going to love the way it feels. And he will have met his goal, and he will be successful. Here is my gripe with these types of goals and this type of success. It's short-lived.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends are getting married and having kids right now. A lot of people I knew in high school. And I think it's because people are constantly looking to achieve the next goal. And if you are not achieving a goal, you feel stagnant, you feel depressed, and you want to kill yourself because you're not moving forward. You're stuck. So let's walk through the life of an average American. You graduate elementary school and you get into a good high school. You go to high school and you study for your SATs. You get a good score on your SATs and you get into a good college. You get into a good college and you do well there. You get a good job. You find somebody who loves you well enough to get married to, right? Then you get married. Then you buy a home. Then you get a dog, and then you have a kid. And then the kid takes up the next 20 years. You're going to, that whatever other goals that you wanted after that are put on the back burner because you have a fucking kid now. Probably 2, maybe even 3, right? Maybe not. The average birth rate's decreasing. But my point is, people are constantly looking for what the next thing is. And I think that the American lifestyle promotes that exact lineage and that exact chain. And the problem with that is that as soon as a lot of people have postpartum depression, because this goal that you've just achieved is now the only path that you have for the next 20 years. Not always. People work and continue to pursue their goals while having kids, but in the people that I've met, their kids are their entire life.
Yeah.
And they have
Especially
to put
in the mother's case.
Yeah, they have to put their entire lives on hold for this kid.
Some people love that, but
right.
That's not everyone's cup of tea, and
right.
To each their own.
Right. For some people, the goal after having a kid is to get your kid into a good school and then have your kid get good grades in the SAT, and now you're living vicariously through your kid. But the problem is people set short-term goals that are achievable. Get a good job, get married, buy a house, have a kid. Those are short-term goals that are easily attainable. By short-term, I mean like within 5 years, right?
Right.
Very few people set goals further than 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. I have a 30-year goal right now. $1 billion by 50.
Yeah.
It's a 30-year goal. That's an audacious goal for 30 years, but that's the goal. And that means to achieve my goal and not go insane, I need to set sub-goals on the way there. But what's the big golden goal of the chain that I just laid out? There isn't one. Like, that's just the American dream. That's the white picket fence. There is no big goal at the end. What's the big goal? Have grandkids? Like, you're not in control of that. Your kids are in control of that. They're just a bunch of smaller goals. And I think that same with being fake rich, you fall into the trap of, my goal is to get a Ferrari. My goal is to get a $100,000 Ferrari. My goal is to get an $80,000 Ferrari. And then you get your Ferrari, and now what? You flex your Ferrari? Now you're kind of stuck. And I think that that's the importance of setting the big, hairy, audacious goals that we set, is that we're always progressing towards something. And if we're not, we feel stagnant and we need to get our asses back in gear. And then that's going to make us feel progression again. And I think that's the importance of setting audacious goals.
I hear that. I think that's a great point and well said.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next point. So the first segment, we talked about people being fake rich and how that impacts their goals. Ultimately, I think that they will fall short of their potential, but still meet their goals. The second topic that I want to talk about is social circles. This kind of goes hand in hand with being fake rich. I have an anecdote here. I was shopping for something nice and I was getting input from a coworker, and I was like, dude, this is expensive. I don't know if I should go for it. I'm just not sure. And he said, oh, well, don't worry about it. You can count it as a business expense. And I was like, I cannot, and my business will not pay for this. And he was like, no. But I mean, like, you can rationalize it as a business expense, because if you get this nice thing and you flaunt it around, other rich people will notice, and then they'll want to hang out with you. And then, you're surrounding yourself with more wealthy people, and then you'll become more wealthy. And I was like,
says like a poor person who realizes that rich people aren't impressed by what you have, but how hard you work.
Yeah, right. I was like,
this is the poor person as in your coworker.
Right.
You and I, but
exactly. I was like, what?
we're broke.
Yeah. Broke and poor are different. Poor means you'll never earn money, and broke means I don't have money right now, but I know how to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody starts broke. But I was like, dude, this is flawed. That's so deeply flawed for so many reasons. But the first and foremost is the quote that I read 10 seconds ago. You impress poor people by buying nice things. You impress rich people by working hard. And he was like, well, the rich people aren't going to notice you working hard if you don't have nice things. That's how they know you are rich. And I was like, have you met Mark Pylock, the fucking owner of the AMC? Brother dresses like Jimmy Buffett.
$20 Hawaiian shirt every fucking night. It's hilarious.
Exactly. He dresses like Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett died with a net worth over $500 million. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Dude, it doesn't matter what you fucking wear. It matters how hard you work.
Yeah.
But there's this misconception that I want to talk about is, if you have nicer things, people from higher social circles will want you. Examples of this that I've seen at work, some more anecdotes, is if you don't drink, you can't intermingle and you won't make it in business. One of my coworkers came by my cubicle.
You saw that at work? I heard that on Alex Hormozy the other day.
Oh, really?
Dude, I thought you pulled that exact thing from Alex Hormozy, because they brought up the drinking thing and the golf thing in one of the recent podcasts.
I'm so
almost
funny.
Positive it was Alex Hormozy. And he was talking about...
Let me tell my story. And then I'll tell Alex's story.
No, that's so funny that you pulled it from someone, or, pulled it from yourself.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I was sitting in my cubicle with these guys that work in another building, and they were in my building for a meeting. They were like, oh, let me see where you sit. That way I can hunt you down and find you when I need you. And I was like, cool. So I showed them where I sat. And I was like, while you're here, let me show you this thing. I pulled it up on my computer, and we were looking at it. Something. Someone was like, we should make a bet, like a beer bet. And then the task lead did. He was like, we should make a beer bet. And my coworker was like, oh, Mason doesn't drink. And the task lead was like, oh, you don't drink? And I was like, I mean, I don't have like a no alcohol policy, but I just don't like it, so I don't really ever drink. And he was like, oh, okay, well then maybe we could do like a seltzer bet or something like that. And I was like, I mean, I'll do a beer bet because I'm going to win, so I don't mind, getting a free beer. Like, I'm just not a big alcohol guy.
Sure.
And he was like, okay. And he was like, why? And I was like, well, I drank a lot in college and high school. College. I just drank in college.
We had a 4-year delay going to high school because we were stupid.
Because we drank a lot.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, my friend and I drank a lot in college. And when we graduated, I was like, I remember I was drinking. It was like just like the two of us or something. And I was drinking and I was like, dude, I feel like shit. And he was like, yeah, well, every time we drink, we feel like shit. And I was like, why do we drink? And he was like, well, it's because it's good for parties, because parties suck if you don't drink. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to party. I want to work. And drinking doesn't help me work. Yeah. So let's just stop drinking. And I haven't really had anything since then. And my boss was like, oh. And my coworker was like, you don't understand how much this kid works. And I told my coworker, I was like, you don't understand how much I really work. Like, you don't know me outside of work. You just hear about my week. Because when we talk about our weekend, they're like, oh, I went to the beach, or I watched the boats on the harbor or whatever. What'd you do, Mason? And I was like, I worked.
Yeah. Every weekend.
They're like, you came in over the weekend? And I was like, no, I work at home.
It's funny because if my coworkers knew how much I work outside of work, they'd fucking have a completely different picture of me.
I think I'd be fired. Yeah. I think they'd be like, dude, you put in 20% effort at work every day. Like, this is what you're capable of outside of work. Why are you blue balling us, dude? Yeah. Why are you sandbagging? But yeah, I was like, I don't really care. I don't drink. And they were like, oh, well, you should, because they do these happy hours with upper management, and it's a great way to get familiar with people in upper management. And I was like, I don't care. And I don't care because I don't care if I'm promoted. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not there for the money. You know, I'm there for the love of systems engineering and the love of the platform. I work for the DoD, so patriotism is a part of that too. But generally speaking, I was like, I don't care if higher up people like me or not. If they like my work, cool. I would expect a raise or promotion for that. But apart from that, like, I don't care if they like me. And I've had a very similar relationship to golf, because from a young age, I remember in PE, I went to a fucking academic prep high school. So it's just like the rich white kid sports were lacrosse and golf. I didn't like either, so I started rowing club outside of school, which is another rich white kid sport. But I fucking hated golf. And as I have gotten older, my parents and other people I know were like, oh, maybe you should try golf. And I was like, I don't like golf. I don't have the patience. I don't give a fuck. I don't like it. I don't think it's interesting. And they were like, all the big business dealings are done on the golf course. And I was like, not mine. They can meet me in my fucking office. And they were like, well, you're never going to make it. And so my quote is, the only way to make it in business is to learn how to golf. I fucking refuse. I'll make it a different way. I don't care. And I don't care if I don't reach the heights that I plan to, if it's because I didn't learn how to play golf, because I want to be success on my own terms, not by fucking golfing. And the last one I have is the dearest and dearest to my heart, which is, if you are politically correct, people won't like you and you won't make it in business. Yeah. And the summation of these three things are, if other people don't like you, then you won't make it. Yeah. If you don't drink with them, which is something they like to do, if you don't golf with them, which is something they like to do, and if you are politically correct, and that's not something that they like, so they aren't going to want to work with you. And my thinking is, why am I worried about what other people think? They should be worried about what I think, or we should not care what each other thinks and just consider what works in business. Right. So that's my opening statement.
I want to correct, first, I have a few points to make on that. I want to correct myself. It wasn't an Alex Hormozi podcast. It was the, what was the Trump interview with the comedian?
Theo Vaughn?
Theo Vaughn. It was that episode. Theo Vaughn was talking about a friend of his who was just into drinking because he wanted to make social connections in social circles, and he didn't even like it. And he actually ended up getting an alcohol addiction, and he died from it. You know, rest in peace. Very Trump sad. Yeah, Trump does not drink and never has.
Yep.
Or smoke or do drugs or anything like that.
Attaboy.
Which I didn't know, and was surprising. And also, I think that point really drives home the fact that you don't have to abide by these things to make it in business.
Yep.
Right? And to figure out, to live out your dreams and to pursue something greater. But despite that, I think there is some truth to entering specific social or I think there's some truth to, if you are in certain social circles, it does yield a benefit. Mm-hmm. And one of the examples that I have is, everyone knows the what color is your Bugatti guy, Andrew Tate, right? And he talks about when he bought his first Ferrari, he didn't even want the car. What he wanted access to was the clubs and the events that Bugatti owners went to, because that's a great place to network, right? So I think there can be some benefit to, like, either buying your way into a social circle or fitting into a social circle. To me, where the line comes down is, are you going into the social circle outside of what you believe is value, like outside of your own personal values? Like, if you believe you shouldn't drink, are you drinking just to get into the social circle and breaking your own values and morals, right? Or, the Bugatti example is different because, I don't think many people would like break their morals or values by getting a car. You know what I mean?
Well, my counter to that would be, if I'm a car guy and I really want a Ferrari and I get a Ferrari and then I want to share that love with people and I want to chat with people who are also into Ferraris and then I happen to network that way, awesome. But I think that getting a car that I'm not really interested in for the function of networking is probably not something that I would do.
Yeah. But I think despite that fact, I think personally there are benefits that can occur because of jumping into that circle, right? Like I'm sure if I went to a Bugatti event, I'd meet someone, right? If I was ever invited to that sort of thing, in the next year. I mean, one day I will be, but there can be benefits to those social circles. For me personally, it just comes down to, am I breaking what I'm personally interested in, what I personally believe to meet this social circle? And if you are, then I would say don't do that. But if you aren't, maybe there is a benefit to it, right? And then on top of that, for every person out there who doesn't drink or doesn't golf or doesn't jump into these social circles and doesn't want to because it breaks their moral values or whatever, there are other entrepreneurs out there that are just like them. You just have to work on your path and do what you believe in and work hard and pursue your dreams. And the people who match you, I think, will, gravitate towards you, or you will gravitate towards them, right? So I don't think that it's necessary to learn how to golf or something like that.
Right. I think that people in any social setting that we're talking about, there is benefit. Yeah. Putting yourself around more successful people, I think will probably always be beneficial, whether or not you like golfing. If you're on the golf course with those people, it's going to be beneficial. The problem is there's also a deficit to the ones that you don't align yourself with. So if I'm not a drinker, but I go to a bar to align myself with higher status people, the benefit is I'm aligning myself with higher status people. That's a benefit whether or not I'm a drinker. But if I'm breaking my own moral code by drinking, that's a deficit. So you have to weigh the benefits and the deficits. I think that my sticking point is that I flat out won't do it if there's a deficit at all, no matter what. Like breaking my own moral code with drinking, whatever, right? But the thing is, I don't care about the benefits, the potential benefits, if it's not something that I'm genuinely interested in. So a great example is, a while ago, I had this idea that you and I should start going to city council meetings to meet people involved with our local government to try and get a better understanding of the permitting and the codes and stuff. And it always helps to have someone in politics who's your friend. And I've had trouble like getting the
drive.
Yeah, the drive to go, because it's not something that I really care about. I don't really like politics. I don't fucking care about these people. Like, it would be nice to have the information of how things work. So I'd be willing to sit through a meeting with the payoff of understanding how permitting works, for example. But I'm not really there to make friends with the mayor because I want favor from the mayor. I don't care about politics in that way. I think that's my stance on it. And I think there's value in both.
Yeah.
But that answers my question. Do you think there's validity in these perspectives? And it sounds like there is, right? Because there is a benefit.
I think there is some validity to those perspectives. I think that if you go around, if you are a good person who sticks to your moral values, you will find people that match you, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's, if you are someone who's like incapable of being politically correct or politically polite when there is a situation where that is needed, I think that is not to your benefit necessarily, right? I think that we've both walked into situations where we, needed and knew we needed to be conscientious of what we say around the people that are with us, right?
Right.
And I think that yields some benefit in certain situations, and I think that there is some validity to the point of these social circles and how to fit in. But ultimately, I think if you follow your own path and you do your own thing, the right people will gravitate.
So I wouldn't include those people in our social circle. So let's change the definition. Let's change the definition of what a social circle is, or define it, because I don't think we have yet. I define social circle as trusted confidants who I work regularly with.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't go into business with somebody who isn't in my social circle, right?
Yeah.
So the people who we have to watch ourselves around, I wouldn't go into business with. I'm not comfortable with that person, right? I'll watch myself click down on the click. Nope.
Oh.
I don't mind like being politically correct or, not drinking or not golfing. Like, I don't mind minding myself and, politely declining or anything if I'm in an area where there's people who I'm not really close to. So like getting a Ferrari to join a Ferrari club and then kind of like just being polite to people, but not really deeply engaging with anybody. Like, I feel like people will join, I'm just using the Ferrari Club as an example.
Sure.
People will buy a Ferrari to join that club, to try and find people to make deep, meaningful impact with, even if it's not genuine, because they want the benefits. But I refuse to make a deeper connection with somebody if it's not genuine, because I'm not seeking those.
And I think ultimately too, that if you jump into a social circle like a Ferrari club and you're not into Ferraris and you hate cars, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You will not be passionate enough about that club and about that experience and that venue and atmosphere to properly network and to make those connections.
I think people will fake it.
So, I guess that's another point for the follow your own path and your own dreams and your own moral values, and the other people will gravitate to you. If you are in your own boat, you will be more successful by default.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think that people, maybe this is what it boils down to. People aren't afraid of disingenuous connection if it's in their benefit. But I don't want to be anywhere near somebody who does not act authentically towards me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely know what you mean. I hear you.
So, I mean, my social circle is 2 people. It's you and my girlfriend. That's my social circle. Mm-hmm. That's it. There are a couple people who we're like starting to integrate in a little bit more, but I mean, that is mostly business at this point. Like right. you and Grace are pretty much it. But I think that your social circle is important. They're a living persona of how you spend your time. So if you spend your time around people who do things you don't like doing, like golfing, then you're not really being authentic. Generally, it's a reflection of who you are as a person, whether you like it or not. So if you hang out with people who don't do things that you like or aren't really your style person, I had a friend in early college who hung out with all his friends from high school, and they did drugs all the time. And when I became friends with him, I was like, hey, dude, like, I don't really like doing drugs. And he was like, dude, me neither. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, maybe you can stop doing drugs and then you can hang out with me more because I don't do drugs. And he was like, okay, yeah, like I'll give that a shot. And ultimately, I think he was happier when we were hanging out because he wasn't hanging out with people who did stuff that he didn't like. And ultimately, that reflected more positively on him because it was more accurate of who he is as a person. And that time that you give is generally correlated to quality. So the longer you spend with somebody, the deeper that bond is. And the less time you spend with somebody, the more shallow that bond is. And I don't want to spend a lot of time with somebody who I don't align with, like if I don't enjoy that time.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
Right. But I feel like a lot of people have no problem spending a lot of time with somebody and trying to forge a deeper bond for their own personal gain, their own benefit.
I would agree. And, I think that comes from weak people primarily.
Yeah, I think so too. I've got a quote here which says, with all that said, associate yourself with people who are going to better you. If someone is going to make you a better person, it's likely that they're better than you at this moment. If that's the case, then they won't care about your fashion sense. They won't care about what you wear or what you drive or if you golf or if you drink. They care about who you are as a person. And that's a genuine person. And that's the kind of people I think that you should try to surround yourself with. Or at least those are people that I try to surround myself with.
I would agree. I strive to do the same thing, although sometimes it is challenging and I'm still growing, but I would agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. So I'll reiterate, you can impress poor people by outspending them. To impress rich people, you need to outwork them. And then I'll close it out with this. I think people recognize both of these points with fake rich and being in social circles. But I think they don't want to put the work in. I think it's easier to buy something nice than it was to actually earn the money in the first place to purchase it. And people are so afraid of the hard work that they just lie to themselves to justify it.
And that segues into my last point too, which is it's easier to work for your money than to figure out how to make your money work for you.
Exactly. So it's easier to buy the fancy hat and buy the fancy car and hope that that gets you a key in with more successful people because they'll just hand you opportunities. Really what you're looking for when you're trying to associate people of a higher stature is you're hoping that they make you one of them. And I think that to do so with the intention of hoping that they make you one of them, I mean, I guess it's not disingenuous because you're being genuine, but I think it's fucking gross to try and form a deep bond with somebody because you hope they bring more money into your life.
Yeah. Actually, Greg talked about this on the Matthew Cox podcast. He said it's funny how many friends you get when you're wealthy.
Yeah.
And how many friends you don't have when you're not wealthy. Like,
right.
It's a really funny and interesting discrepancy.
Yeah.
And also, the people who cheer for you when you make it, those people weren't there for you when you were in your lonely stage or in your hardest times.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would agree. I think it's very important to surround yourself with people who are genuine and who care and who are there for you and push you to be and grow into yourself every day.
Greg said that you have more friends when you're wealthy.
He very briefly touched on it in the podcast. They were talking about how when Greg was making all his money in the ballet company, he had so many friends, and then he sold that ballet company and he was kind of just living out of his savings and stuff like that. And he was talking about how he started to lose his friends and they didn't pick up the phone for him and stuff like that. And it was because he just wasn't, or at least in his opinion, wasn't that, wealthy guy anymore.
That's interesting. I wonder if you make more friends when you're wealthy because wealthy people genuinely don't have as much to worry about. And so they're just like kinder people. And so it's easier to be friends with people. Or I also wonder if maybe the reason people stopped being friends with Greg wasn't because he didn't have the same money that he used to, so they couldn't use him. I wonder if they stopped being friends with Greg because he didn't have his shit together and because he was addicted to drugs.
I think there's a balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is validity to the point that, it's easier to make friends when you can buy, everyone a drink and you can chill out in the private suite and stuff like that. Like a lot of people gravitate towards that. And there are a lot of fake people in the world that gravitate towards that. And I think there's another aspect to it of he just didn't have his shit together and people were like, come on, man.
Right.
And like now he obviously has his shit together in a much better life. But I think there's validity to both points.
Right. I think that no matter what kind of money you have, I'm still going to be your friend.
Right.
But if you take on a crippling drug addiction and do nothing to stop yourself and fully succumb to it, then I'm not going to fucking hang out with you anymore. Because at that point, you're not bettering me and you're not showing any proof for improvement, right?
Right.
So I can't even blame those people for not being around Greg anymore. Now, I will say, if Greg was making money and like bought bottle service for his friends and took them out and stuff, and then he hit a certain level of wealth and he just stopped paying for those things, if people stopped being your friend at that point, then they were very clearly using you. If people only hang out with you when you buy them shit, then that's, fuck. I like to say that I'm not that person because you bought me a lot of Kratom when we were in college, and I continue to hang out with you now, even though you don't buy me as many drinks anymore. But I think that I would like to think that people stopped hanging out with Greg because he wasn't himself because of the drugs and not because of his level of wealth. Because I think Greg's a good guy.
I would agree. At least that would be my hope.
Yeah. So my final segment is on work-life balance. To recap, so far we've gone over people being fake rich, the importance and unimportance of social circles, and now I want to talk about work-life balance. This final misconception I actually was grown up told. So I grew up being told that rich people die alone because they cut off their friends and family to get there, and that's why the person talking to me, telling me this, is happy that they're not rich because the family and friends are important to them. And along with that, they roll in the importance of having a work-life balance and how friends and family are important de-stressors. But by cutting out the friends and family, rich people are piling stress onto themselves, leading them to an early, lonely grave. So my question is, why do you think this misconception exists? Where does it come from? And do you think that these people are actually happy that they're not rich? Or do you think that they're just telling themselves that to feel better?
Yeah, I kind of wonder if, a lot of people who think it's better to not be rich make points like, well, your family and friend connections are going to wane if you try to pursue this great wealth, or it's a stressful experience to build a business, and is that really worth it when, you could be relaxing and enjoying your 9 to 5 with 40 hours a week and then chilling for the other time that you have, or it's so lonely to start a business, especially if you don't have a partner or friend to do it with. Like, is it really worth going into it? You can just work your 9 to 5 and relax,
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if it's a misconception because most of those things are true to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like your other friend and family connections might be less meaningful as you pursue business more and more, or they might wane or depreciate, and it is stressful to build a business. I mean, Elon Musk said that building businesses is like staring into abyss while eating glass. We brought that up in I think the previous podcast, And it is lonely at times. Like, it is hard to get through it. You know, obviously we have each other to get through it, but if you are on your own, it can be especially challenging, right? So, you know, I think that to an extent, it's a misconception in the sense that being wealthy ultimately is better, right? But I think that some of the reasons to not pursue it are valid, and it's just a matter of, are you willing to pay the price? Sorry, excuse me.
Naked.
But, you know, I think your question was, why do people fall into this generally misconception, right? Because ultimately it is better to be wealthy.
Right.
And to, you know, achieve something, in our opinions, greater. And God, people find an infinite number of excuses to convince themselves that it's just pointless to be rich and it's better to be poor. And in some way, somehow, they are on the righteous path by not pursuing this great wealth or this great big dream, right? And it's really interesting. This is the anecdote I mentioned in our intro that I want to bring up now. I grew up with a lot of wealthy people in the neighborhood I lived in. And the wealthy people never complained about being wealthy. I never heard them come be like, man, it sucks to have money. All right, you never hear that. And the kids of wealthy parents never complained about how stressful it is or how much it sucks to be wealthy. You never heard that. Never in my life, right? But the complainers were mostly middle-class folk or people who were on the verge of reaching that upper wealth. They were like upper middle class, and they were like close to getting to that point. And the analogy I want to bring in is the complainers were almost like people who were standing under an apple tree, and there was an apple that they didn't say they wanted, but they kind of wanted just out of reach. And they had to build a ladder in order to get to that apple. And that ladder is the business, right? And instead of building that ladder and going through that process, they decided that the apple laying on the ground was better anyways, right? And so I think that mindset comes from, you know, regardless whether you're poor or middle class or upper class, that mindset of, oh, what I have is better now comes from a weak mindset. And it comes from kind of a slacker mindset, at least in my eyes, right? And I saw this growing up. It wasn't just in the case of money or in wealth. It also happened with classes. Like if, you know, some kid wasn't in some honors class that was clearly a better education and a better program, they're like, oh, well, my class is better anyway because I get to hang out with my friends and have better life experiences. And, you know, I have these things that the honors classes don't have, so my class must be better. Or they aren't good in STEM. And so instead of trying to get better in STEM and get better at math and science, they're like, oh, well, like arts is better anyway. You learn more about life and connecting with other people and blah, 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 right? And those points have some validity to them. Obviously, you learn different things if you go down different paths. But ultimately, I think that, you know, they use the path they're currently on and the comfortable path as an excuse for not pursuing a path that would ultimately lead them to somewhere greater and better and to achieving their dreams, or what I would say is a dream. So like wealth and freedom and prosperity and, you know, a great life where you don't have to worry about these things, right? They use their current state as an excuse. And although you know, everyone has their own path and something that, you know, they can go down, I find it self-deprecating and problematic to convince yourself that the absence of financial growth is better. Because ultimately, the people who are wealthy don't complain about being wealthy, right? There are people who are famous who complain about being famous because, you know, it's hard when you go out there and everyone is in your face and asking you questions and wanting pictures, right? I've heard people complain about that sort of thing. But as a general sense, to have financial freedom and to have money, I've never heard anyone say, man, it sucks to be financially free, right? And so that's kind of the anecdote and the point that I wanted to bring up. And I wanted to know what your thoughts and your experiences were growing up, and did you see something similar, or was your experience different? How does your or any personal anecdote that you have tie into that sentiment?
I like the apple tree analogy. That's a good one.
Yeah, I thought of that one.
Yeah. I heard a lot of this growing up. I grew up in a middle class, and then towards high school, like a little bit of an upper middle class family, but I would say it's probably average, like an average family. We lived in a neighborhood with an average age of like mid-50s. So like when I was younger, I grew up around a lot of people who were retiring. And, you know, they were retiring comfortably, but they didn't have a ton of money. But when considering people who did have a lot of money, I remember my brother really wanted to have a lot of money when he was young. And so he would ask my parents, like, what's the job that pays the most? My mom said doctor. He was like, I'm going to be a doctor because I want to have a lot of money. And my mom would be like, well, are you sure? Because, you know, when you have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of friends, you're going to cut us off as a family, and like, you're going to be sad and lonely. My brother was like, yeah, but I'll be sad and lonely with jet skis. So is it really all that bad? And I remember I never really shared that sentiment. I never really understood it. Because to my perspective, it's you can live your life the exact way that you want to. You don't have to give up your friends and family to pursue wealth. Like, you just pick better friends and pick better family, right? If you're not going to stick by me while I pursue my goals, then you're not really supporting me anyways. I don't want you in my life. I don't care if you're family or not, if you don't support me in what I want to do. But I kind of feel that the people who do think this way are similar to the people who are fake rich, in that you're as successful as you want to be. So if you set your goals to be easily attainable and then you attain them, you'll be happy on paper. I want to buy a Ferrari. So you buy an $80,000 Ferrari and now you're good. I don't want to be rich. You're born not rich. There you go. Like, it's easy to acquire. I think the problem is, in both scenarios, these people are selling their goals too short. You hit these goals too quickly, and then you're left with nothing past that, and that makes these people bitter. So the people with a Ferrari and a $5,000 watch surround themselves with people who have less money, because the people who have more money make them feel worse about what they have, and the people who don't have any money are, you know, bitter towards the people who do have money and just say, oh, you know, the grass is not greener on the other side. I value my family. I want to keep my family. Dude, there are tons of millionaires and billionaires who have very strong family ties. They're billion-dollar families, but it's easier to just tell yourself that it's actually worse over there, because you're not even in the position to know.
Yeah.
You're passing that assumption because it makes the grass greener over here. But that leads to an interesting dilemma that I thought about while you were talking, with the people who were like, oh, my class is better than their class, which is, life is what you make of it. You can be an optimist. You could say you're happy where you are. At what point are you an optimist, and at what point are you delusional? Because, like, taking your class analogy, you could say, well, this class is better because I get to hang out with my friends. Okay, you're an optimist. You're making the best of a bad situation. But you're not recognizing that it's a bad situation. You're saying it's a good situation. You're in the remedial math class. That means you're not learning the things that you need to be learning to progress. Yeah. What's your goal? I feel ultimately the difference between optimism and realism is a recognition of where your goals are. Because if you don't have ambitious goals, I think you end up being an optimist. You just tell yourself that, you know, I'm happy wherever I am. You know, I would love you even if we lived under a bridge. No, you fucking wouldn't. If you lived under a bridge, you'd be so unhappy. But it's easy to tell yourself that because you're setting your goals very slow. You're setting your goals very short, very low.
Yeah.
And I think that you're a realist when you set your goals like, you know, well, I want an SAT score of 1600. That means I can't be in the remedial math class. I'm glad I'm here because I'm learning, but I need to be getting better at this. That's realist. I think that's the difference.
I would agree. I feel bad for the people who set their goals short and set their goals low, because I don't think that they really realize they're in that boat. Mm-hmm. Just like the people who don't realize they're fake rich.
Right.
You know, they think that they are on the best path. Maybe genuinely they feel that this is the greatest path, right? And they convince themselves of that through, you know, TikTok reels who tell them that it's stupid to be poor and it's stupid to be rich and it's better to be poor. Right. And I feel sad for those people, because I think that there is a potential path out there for them that is prosperous and great and meets all the little kid dreams that they had, that they then shoved under the rug through propaganda that tells them that, you know, being rich sucks.
Right.
And I would hope that by us working hard every day and pursuing something greater, we can at least, you know, help one other person see that pursuing your dreams and your goals is a better option and a better path than being satisfied or convincing yourself that this lifestyle you currently have is the best lifestyle anyway.
Yeah. I think these people are disillusioned. They don't understand quite why or how far off the mark they are. So it's easier to just say I'm exactly where I want to be and I'm happy where I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a real life analogy of this disillusionment and like the people don't understand where they're at, even sometimes when they are rich. One of our friends, Justin, was talking to me the other day, about Steve Harvey, because Steve Harvey has this $100 rule. Did I tell you about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, briefly.
Steve Harvey has this big bills rule. He only carries around $100 bills because he believes that is what's it called? It's called positive affirmations or something like that. Oh, the law of attraction. That's what this is called. Steve Harvey believes in the law of attraction. So he uses big bills because he believes that if he only uses hundreds, that's going to attract more hundreds into his life. And if he goes out to dinner, he pays with 100, even if it's McDonald's. He says, keep the change. Or if he goes on vacation, he'll give his family the smaller bills because he doesn't want to have the smaller bills on him. He only want to have the bigger bills on him because that's going to attract bigger bills. And I looked at Justin and I said, that's retarded. And Justin was like, Steve Harvey is a personal hero of mine. And I was like, your hero is retarded. And he was like, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean? And I was like, explain to me, operationalize it. Tell me exactly how, using the scientific method that's replicable, using $100 bills attracts more $100 bills into your life. And he tried to revert back to the same point from our social circles, which is if you use higher dollar bills, other people who have higher dollar bills are going to recognize that, and then they'll come over and talk to you and intermingle. And I was like, you really think that if I use a $100 bill at a restaurant, the waitress, a billionaire, is going to try and strike up conversation with me? And he was like, well, no, it's not a good example. And I was like, give me a good example. And he didn't have one. And I was like, then tell me right now why the law of attraction is real. I believe in manifesting because I believe that vision.
I think there is an important distinction between the law of attraction and manifesting because it's very easy to confuse the two.
Yeah. The podcast is called Vision 79. I believe in visions and I believe in manifesting. But that's because I believe if we set a
law of attraction 79,
if we set a goal so crystal clear that we don't have the option, we don't give ourselves the option of hitting anywhere off that mark, then we're going to work constantly to get there, to make that vision a reality. But that's because we believe there are inputs behind that. It's not just going to come to us. No one's going to knock on your door and say, can I teach you something today? You've got to knock on doors and ask, teach me something today. But this law of attraction, the point I made was even people who are successful, like Steve Harvey, who's a millionaire, don't understand how they got that money. Because Steve Harvey, he's a nice guy. I like the stuff that he does. He seems personable. But in carrying around these large bills and preaching the law of attraction, what he's telling me is I don't understand how I make my money. And so I'm just going to hope that more comes my way. So people are going to carry around large bills because they're going to hope that more money comes their way. Steve Harvey doesn't know how he makes his fucking money. Because if Steve Harvey knew how he made his money and wanted to make more money, he would go do more of that and get better at that. When Alex Hormozi wants to make more money, what the fuck do you think he does? He goes out and acquires a new business. He finds a new product to sell. He finds a new sales technique. He scours the data from all his social media marketing campaigns and figures out how to do it better and to optimize, right? He doesn't fucking use bigger bills and hope more comes his way. That's not an actionable item.
Yeah.
And so my point to Justin was people are so disillusioned with the work that it takes to get there that it's so much easier to just carry around hundreds and hope that some higher power brings you more money than it is to operationalize earning money and go do that.
Do you think it's that Steve Harvey doesn't understand how he got there, or he doesn't understand how to grow from where he is? Right? Because I think that, I'm not well versed in Steve Harvey's story, but
it's like a game show move.
Yeah. He from what I've heard, he did work really hard to get to that point, right?
Okay.
So at least from what I've seen, I think that the law of attraction is an excuse for people who don't know how to get through to the next step.
Okay.
Right. I believe that people get to a certain point, and if they work hard, they think that, okay, my hard work got me to this point, but there must be some other thing that gets me to the next point. It can't be just hard work, which I just did. Right. They think there's some other thing. So they throw themselves at this law of attraction of, oh, okay, well, if it's, if I get to this point and it took this thing, for some reason, they think that the key to the next step is not that previous thing.
Yeah.
And so they try this law of attraction thing where maybe it will magnetize towards me and, blah, 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 right? Which I think is bullshit.
I know you don't believe this, but that's like filling your car up with gas and then when it runs out again, trying water because you just tried gas.
Yeah, right. No, right. I agree with you that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
That's just an analogy.
Right. But I think that there are people out there who think that the first thing they tried can't be the answer to every problem out there, right? And I think that there are a lot of problems out there that can be just answered through hard work. Do more, do better.
Right. I remember also seeing this thing, because Justin showed me a clip of Steve Harvey talking about this. He said, I remember when I was younger and I didn't have money, I would just like wake up every morning and pray to God that he would send money my way. And eventually he did. He answered my prayers and now I make money, which I think sets the precedent for not understanding how he got there. I think he understands, oh, I have a job and I'm a show host, but I'm fortunate to be here. God led me here and it's some higher power that got me this role. And now I do a good job now that I'm here, but I don't understand what it is that makes me money. Otherwise I would be doing more of it. Right? For the Steve Harvey instance, anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, I still think I think he said it well, that people get to a certain point and then they don't understand how to get past that.
Well, it's like, imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
A lot of students have imposter syndrome when they graduate college and go get a real job because they feel like they don't belong there. And guess what? If you feel like you don't belong there, it's because you don't, right?
Yeah.
It means that you're underprepared for the actions that you're currently taking. So similarly with Steve Harvey, it's if you don't understand why you're there or what work you did to make that money, how would you be expected to do more? And honestly, I don't even know how much of it is hard work, because would you consider the work that we did to get our college degrees and get our jobs hard work?
I mean, there were times where I worked pretty hard.
Needlessly. We could have gotten D's.
Okay, fair. Yeah. The actual paper degree, I don't think, inherently says that you worked hard.
Right. Compared to what we're doing now, it's not very hard work because we've raised our bar. Yeah. But so many people have their bar so low that minimal effort tastes like hard work. And then you get money out of that. And when you make money, it means you can kick back and you don't have to work so hard anymore. And so there must be some other way to make money, invest, whatever, et cetera. But like, even if you want to look at investing or something easy, buying real estate and flipping houses, or not even flipping houses, but just putting tenants in it, like all of those different things have actions. You take an action, you put money somewhere, and then you get money back out of it. But using larger bills in hopes that it attracts other larger bills is fundamentally delusional. It's insanity. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's fucking nuts.
What do you think is the core distinction between manifestation and the law of attraction? Because I think we stated that they are different and there is a big difference. But like, what is that difference?
Input. Yeah. When you have a vision, I'll speak to the camera then. When you have a vision, you're setting a goal for yourself to try and meet, and you're going to work to try and achieve that goal. So for rowing, let's take example. I would manifest and I would remember, what's it going to feel like when I cross the line first? What's it going to feel like when I'm done rowing and I can see the other boats finishing behind me? What's that going to feel like? I want that feeling. I'm going to chase that feeling. And I use that vision every day when I train for 3 hours. Every time I'm racing and my legs start to hurt or I can't fucking breathe and I'm right next to the other boat, I go, no. I know what this is going to feel like. I'm going to use that to motivate myself. Ultimately, vision is motivation. Manifestation is motivation, I think. And I think that, what was the other one? The law of attraction is hope, not motivation. You're hoping that someone else makes it happen. And in vision, you're motivating yourself to make it happen.
And to tie it back to your input idea too, the law of attraction hopes that someone else gives the input that you need, and manifestation puts the input power in your own hands.
Right. So similar to in customer interactions or fucking anywhere in life, right? If you can assume responsibility, then what happens next is up to you and you can fix it. But if you put the blame on someone else, when that doesn't happen, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
So if I use big bills and more money doesn't come my way, then it's God's fault or the universe's fault or the law of attraction's fault and not mine. But if I don't work 100-hour weeks, I'm not going to expect to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
You have to put in that input. And I think visualization helps me. That's why we have, is it on your water bottle? We don't have it anywhere. That's why
I was thinking today is actually the first podcast where we don't have a Vision 79 logo somewhere.
That's okay. That the whole point, the whole sticking point is that I believe visions are important. That's why we called the podcast Vision 79. But I think the law of attraction is just silly. It's disillusionment. And I think that ties hand in hand with the work-life balance disillusionment of rich people having to give up their families to have money, social circle disillusionment, where you think that you need to appeal to other people to get to your goals, and fake rich disillusionment, where you think that buying nice things makes you cool and that's achieving your goals. So I'll wrap it up. If you don't have any other points, at the end of each podcast, I like to dial everybody back in. We had awesome, wide-ranging conversation summarizing the week. Now it's time to get back to work. So I'll leave you with this. Authenticity is just a fancy word for the alignment of three things: what you really, truly, and even controversially believe, what you say, and what you do. And most of us don't do it because we're afraid of what people will think of us if they knew what we really believe. And so I want to leave everybody hanging on this podcast with that quote, because everything that we just spoke about in this podcast today is people not being authentic. And I would like to be an authentic person, meaning that what I believe, what I say, and what I do need to align.
I'm striving towards that. I think there are a large amount of moments or times when I do align those three. But I think I get into certain social circles or social groups where those three don't align, and I'm just trying to make it through the conversation. And so that's something that I'm actively working on. So, but I read that on your sheet last night, and I really like that sentiment.
Yeah, I think it summarizes the podcast well.
Very cool. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe. But check out our TikTok specials too. We have little business games on TikTok, so feel free to give us a follow through the link tree in our profile page, and hope you have a great week.